Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hello to all the ships at sea, whether or not you are joining us live or if you're in a circumstance where you're watching this after the fact. Thanks for spending a few moments with us to hear about the work of the Peaceful Heart Network, the 24 hours of tapping, and how all of those things intersect. Basically, what we're going to do for the next little bit here is we're going to be telling you some stories about the things that we learned, the things that surprised us, what I saw, and some really amazing ways that you can get involved going forward. And for this amazing journey, I'd like to bring in my sister. This is Elaine. Good morning.
Good morning.
And so basically what we're going to do is we're just going to be sharing with you some stories along the way and what happened. So the thing that kind of set this up top, how we got involved in all of this is last summer, as many of you know, we did the 24 hours of tapping, which was a fundraiser for the Peaceful Heart Network. The Peaceful Heart Network teaches a really interesting, simple version of tapping that they call TTT, which is a wordless version that they've shared with over 300,000 people in over 30 countries and refugee communities and migrant communities, folks suffering from all sorts of trauma. And after we finished doing the little fundraiser, which many of you participated in, after the event, they said, "So what can we do for you guys?" And we're like, "Can we see the work up close?" And they're like, "Yes, we were just talking about that." So we got the opportunity in January to go to Rwanda and Uganda to see their work up close. Now, a couple of things that are really important to share with you before we jump into this. All of the money that we raised from that particular event went directly to the Peaceful Heart Network. When we had the donation set up, it actually connected directly to their bank account. So we never touched any of that money. The trip that we took is a trip that we paid for to see the work up close and personal. The fundraising we did, you did not pay for us to go on vacation in Africa. I just wanted to set that up front. As we navigate through this, I got some notes that I'll be looking down on and doing all of this. One thing that I think would be really, really important, if you haven't done so already, mark your calendar, July 15th and 16th. We are going to be doing the 24 hours of tapping again. We've already started working on the details. Yes, Elaine.
14th and 15th.
14th and 15th, 14th and 15th. Yes, 14th and 15th. There we go. Friday and Saturday, July 14th and 15th. This is the why we keep people around, to keep me on track, because I get things wrong. So yeah, mark your calendars now. If you're not signed up for notifications, if you go to 24hoursoftapping.com, you can get on the mailing list and all of those informations will come forward. Basically what we're going to do to begin with is we're just going to share some pictures from the trip and kind of walk through some of our experiences, what we saw up close and personal. There's much more detailed stuff on the Tapping Q&A website if you go to tappingqa.com/Africa, but we wanted to share some of the stories. And those also came from my point of view. You'll hear from Elaine as we navigate our way through this. Then after we do a little presentation on the trip itself, we're just going to walk through what surprised us, what impressed us, and what we learned as we are navigating this. If you are on Facebook, if you are on YouTube, if you are on Twitch, wherever you are watching this, if you are watching this live, if you type a comment or a question in, we can actually see those in real time here. If you have questions about the experience, please drop them in there. We will happily answer questions along the way to the best of our ability about the things that we learned. Anything else that we should share before we jump in and kind of share some of our pictures from our travel around Eastern Africa? Awesomeness. So let's just dive in. Now, oftentimes when people think of East Africa, they're thinking of the countries of Rwanda, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and this is what you think about. You think about the African savannah. You think about those amazing pictures of that particular place. And we were lucky enough to, in the middle of that particular trip, we actually got a chance to dip in and experience that just a little bit. And so these are not pictures from a website. These are not pictures from some photo place. These are pictures that we were able to take along the way. In the lower right-hand corner, you can see us with Gunelia and Ulf as we navigated our way through this particular experience. That was one of our drivers when we were in Uganda, which made it possible for us to navigate all of this sort of stuff. But the thing that is, I I think really, really important to recognize about this particular photos is that when people travel to this part of the world, they're in a circumstance that this is what they come home from. And I can remember the day after we spent the day in the park and we were having breakfast, and Lainey turned to me and she's like, most people come to this part of the world and they want to talk about this. The thing that I'm going to want to talk about is the people. The fact that we got to spend time with the Rwandan and Ugandan people. Like, I will never forget watching a baby giraffe run through the middle of a field. And that was a lovely experience, but that was something that was very, very different from our ability to engage in what was going on as we were traveling through all of this. So we got a chance to visit a number of spots along the way in Rwanda and Uganda, which was really cool because we got to see firsthand and up close the different ways tapping is being shared in these different locations. The first place that we went to, we were just outside of Kampala in Rwanda, and this was called the Good News School. And the person on the left there is David. David is the one who started and ran the school. Our travel to this particular school as we went navigating through this big cosmopolitan city. In the last 20 years, Rwanda has done an amazing job in modernizing itself and making itself into not just a local experience, but something that is connected to the global experience. And it was so nice to be around and navigate our way through. And as we were going to the school, we were on roads and roads and roads and roads and roads. And then all of a sudden, I got to the place where, hold on just a second here. Just remember, if you click on it, it's going to appear on the screen, Elaine. And so as we navigated our way through here, all of a sudden we found our way to a dirt road. And then we were on dirt roads that became more and more diminished until we found our way to this school. And David is married to someone who actually works at a boarding school. And so they're doing education in a different way. And every single day he comes into this community to serve these young people and take care of them simply because he loves them so much. For those of you in the United States who remember the old Energizer Bunny commercial where it just keeps going and going and going, that is David. He was just nonstop energy the entire time. The photo on the right is the faculty after they received their certificates for completing the training. They were all super, super proud of that particular thing. And what was really, really amazing as we navigated the day, at the end of the day, something happened to one of the little kids, and the little kid was having a really hard time and was in tears, and it was a conflict or toes got stepped on or whatever. And David was immediately down at eye level, hugging and consoling and being present. And so it was this really amazing operation, but to see him firsthand as we were navigating this, just being present to the kids, it was just a super, super fun morning. On the left, at the end of the morning, in addition to the kids sharing lots and lots of stories and the teachers sharing lots and lots of stories of how tapping can transform their life, they did some traditional African dance for us, which was pretty amazing to see firsthand. On the right is a picture of the little kids, the pre-kindergartners, and we happened to arrive right as they were beginning their day, and they begin every single class day doing some tapping and learning the points and being present to all of that sort of stuff. And so it was so good to see them firsthand being prepared to just be able to tap and do little things in their day to help them to navigate. The other really cool thing about the school was it wasn't just a K-6 school. They also had this really interesting vocational part that they were making for high school students and older to teach them skills. This woman here on the left was learning sewing skills, and she is on a pedal operating old Singer sewing machine. On the right were a bunch of chairs that the older students were making, that we actually got a chance to see them. And then we also got to see this firsthand. This is the young people learning how to tap, doing the tapping. And the thing that, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit when we talk about the things that we were super, super impressed by, is you will notice that it is a member of the school that is teaching them. It is not those of us coming from the outside doing the teaching, that this is something that was very, very, very much a ground up operation. And it was just super cool listening to these older teens talk about not only the skills that they were learning, how it was helping them, but also how they were using tapping regularly in their daily lives. And so it was a chance for us to see that firsthand. So that was our time at the Good News School. There was lots and lots of this going on as we were there. Again, the Rwandan people were nothing but kind and open and just kind of knitting their ways into our hearts. The second place we visited in the north of Rwanda is we attended a training that was put together for 31 healthcare workers. These are either folks that work directly in healthcare or worked in healthcare positions through the Red Cross. This is the building in which we were doing the last part of the training. They had done a number of trainings leading up to this particular thing. The woman you see leading there in the upper left-hand corner is Gunilla, who is with the Peaceful Heart Network, who is just an absolute force of nature in this world that cannot be stopped. We are in this room. We are about 50 meters from a UN refugee welcome center. We were very, very close to the Congolese border at this particular point. And so these were healthcare workers who were up close and personal doing work with people who were navigating, trying to find a new life as they were escaping a very, very dangerous place. One of the things that we learned when we were dealing with the border of the Congo is the Congo, it isn't like, there are places in the world where as a tourist, it is a little unsafe for you to go. We got the impression that Congo was a place that was unsafe for the Congolese as well. That the country in the part we were close to is very much run by armed militias that were very, very dangerous. And so these healthcare workers are responding directly to people who are escaping bloodshed and violence just on the other side of the border. It was really an amazing opportunity. And we also got a chance to enjoy ourselves while we were doing it. Most of the places we went, you may or may not know this, I, at one point in my life, was a professional juggler. So we did a little bit of that. On the left, like this is a great little picture of somebody's little daughter. But this is something that happened over and over and over again. Most of the places we went, there were small children. And the small children were just kind of allowed to be small children. Like even as present, like this is in the middle of a presentation right here. This isn't like we're on break. And this little gal decided that she needed to share her crackers and her cookies with those of us who were presenting. And like at different points, the children that were there were just passed from adult to adult to adult. They just like they weren't allowed to be disruptive, but they also weren't hemmed in, which is really, really fun to see and to be present to all of that as we navigated it. This is one of the trainers who actually helped run the training on the left. When we arrived, like, it was so amazing traveling with Ulf and Gunilla and Placide. Placide was one of the local Rwandese who works with them full time, because they were like rock stars. Like everywhere we went, they were so excited to see Ulf, Gunilla, and Placide show up because they saw how directly that they had transformed their lives. And so like this was the greeting that we received because they were so excited to have these people back in their lives. And it was just awesome. The really cool thing about this particular training, as we were in the middle of this training, Ulf just turned to me and he said, "Oh yeah, by the way, this training happened because of the 24 hours of tapping." Like it was something that directly happened. And so if in any way you contributed to the 24 hours of tapping, you helped to train these 31 people who are here. What you don't realize in this picture, but I can because I know the people that are there, the mayor is in this picture and the pastor of the church is in this picture. That they were so happy to be a part of this and learning this. This is all of them after they received their certificates. And then when we gave them their certificates, one of the things that we did was we made sure we captured pictures of them. Now, The Rwandan people are very interesting when it comes to taking pictures of them. When you say pose for a picture, they get very, very stiff, and you snap the picture, and then all of a sudden they just come back to life again. And so I did the best that I could to get smiles out of them, because they are so much warmer than these pictures are here. This is just 16 of the people that went through the training. And when I made this post on the website about this particular day, I labeled this "The Face of Healing in Rwanda," because that was the case. That the thing that I loved so much as we were hearing these stories is when they were giving their testimonials and sharing what was going on, even though they were using this work in their professional life, even though they were using this work with refugees. Their first stories were about, this is how it changed my life. Their second stories was, this is how it changed my family life. Their third story was, these are the kids that my kids taught how to tap. Then it was, this is something that we get to share. And so it wasn't just a group of people who were gathering and adding a skill so that they could share it with others, but instead they were gathering a skill that was also transforming them. And so the participation from you all made things like this happen in a super direct way, which is just awesome. Like, I didn't know it till we were sitting in that particular church where we were doing this particular training, and I got a chance to do that. The next stop we got to make was to the Mazanze prison. So this is the outside of the prison that we went in. We have limited pictures because they were obviously a little bit sensitive of us taking pictures on the inside. But this was the gathering that we had. And so what you see in front of you are 101 inmates. There's 61 men on the left-hand side of the photo, and there are 40 women on the right-hand side of the photo. And this was the day that they had received their certificates. And like many places, they shared songs, they shared stories, they shared testimonials, they shared poems. One of the things that's so much about the Rwandese people is when they're telling their story, they tell their stories as poems. In the upper left-hand corner, through the window, you can see a group of people on the outside. And you notice that those people are not dressed in orange. Those were the inmates that were arriving the day we were there. There were over 5,000 inmates, both men and women, inside of the facility, obviously separated for something like this. They let those groups come together. And the thing that was most impressive about the inmates was the fact that every single inmate, when they learned to tap, made the decision that they wanted to share tapping with 10 other inmates. And so by the time we had arrived, the 100 people you are seeing in this photo taught another 1,000 people in the facility to tap. One of the things that the Peaceful Heart Network had provided was a couple of tents in which they could do sessions with people. Every single person who is in this picture had received 2 copies of the TTT book, one for themselves, one that they could share with others so they could continue to teach and all of that. And it was amazing to see folks in the face of something very, very difficult, joyfully talking about their transformation and talking about their commitment to transform and help others. It is a day that will not be forgotten very, very soon. And then the last place that we got to share stuff was, this is actually in Uganda. We got a chance to spend a little time in Bidi Bidi. Bidi Bidi, at the time it was founded, was the largest refugee camp in the world because of flooding in Bangladesh. It is now the second largest refugee camp in the world. There are 250,000 people living in this refugee camp, most of them coming from South Sudan, refugees from the civil war in South Sudan. We were immediately across the border. This is a part of the country in which it was refugees, locals, and aid workers. We were in the national park before heading this way. And the town that we stayed in was called Golo. And one of the people at the hotel who was helping my sister with her bags to the car said, "So where are you guys heading next?" And she goes, "Golo." And he just looked at her like she just said, "You're going to Mars," because it was not a place that they expected someone who had just left a wildlife reserve was going to, because it is a place where it is only refugees. The person here on the left is Pastor John. Pastor John personally has taught over 6,000 people how to tap in the refugee camp. He is someone who has moved his family into the refugee camp. He has given his entire life to serve the refugees, emotional, spiritual needs. On the right was us getting a chance to just do some tapping and hearing stories. What was really, really interesting is our schedule changed a little bit. And because our schedule changed a little bit, we did not have as much time here. And the folks here were heartbroken by the fact that we were leaving early because they wanted us to hear all of the stories of transformation. They wanted to share all of the details. They wanted everybody to be able to tell their story about the difference that all of the work had made. And it was really interesting to be in a circumstance, not that they wanted us to stick around so they could show off. They wanted us to stick around so that they could show gratitude for the transformation that had happened in their community. Yeah, it was a pretty amazing thing. So those are just kind of some of the slides, some of the pictures. We'll share some of the insights and whatever that came from that. I kind of drove our way through that. Anything you want to share specifically about the photos or any of that before we kind of dive into the more specific reflections, Elaine?
Probably just to expect tears.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean,
It's
so
amazing.
so when we go to yeah.
The first couple of weeks I got back, physically, when you get back from a journey like this, your body, right? Your body has been 10 to 11 hours off. You've been eating differently, drinking differently. And I think for me, one of the things that has been so interesting, even as watching these slides right now, is how much Jean and I are still moving our way through what we've learned. And I think for any of you who have traveled to developing worlds, probably understand what in our family we call the re-entry process, as you're just figuring out what to do with what you learn and what you feel. And I know I find every time I talk about this journey, I'm at a different place with that. I found last week I was able to actually speak to it for the first time without having my emotions be right on the surface. But it's just amazing watching the slides again, how much I'm just back there. And that's
Yeah.
beautiful and powerful. And I think that's going to be so helpful as we're getting you all excited about this next fundraiser. But it's just also really amazing how you can see their joy and just instantly be back there and feel it.
Yeah, I mean, in the kind of surprise section, the first thing I wrote down in the surprise section was the thing I was not surprised about was how much I cried as we navigated all of this stuff. If you read any of the reflections along the way, I started doing hashtag tear tally, because it was just a circumstance where it was just going to be like connecting with it over and over and over again. Because in the exact same day, we had the opportunity to visit the Good News School in the morning. And then the afternoon, we spent the day at the Rwandan Genocide Memorial. And just kind of putting those two things in juxtaposition, the overcoming of suffering and the creation of suffering, the connections to others, the disconnections from others, and having all of that just so front and center that I know in my daily life, as I navigate around New York City, like I can bump into struggle, but not bump into it in that particular way. And so to kind of see it that way up close and personal and to do that was something that continues to be a hard thing to wrap our heads around. So let's just kind of go into some of the surprises. What was one of the things that surprised you as we navigated our way through this?
Number one would have to be the amount of joy that the people we had a chance to interact with they were so able to tap into that.
Yeah.
Earlier in my career, I worked in social services and primarily worked with kids in foster care. And
Mhm.
that was my first experience of studying the cycles of poverty. And of course, getting to see firsthand what we in the US see and know as poverty versus going to a developing world. And if I am able to take anything from this experience, it is taking with me these beautiful people's ability to find joy in whatever moment that they were in. And I don't know if I had a vision necessarily of what I was anticipating from folks, but especially after learning about, I only knew a little bit about the genocide that took place in Rwanda. And so after
Yeah.
we went to the memorial and the museum, because what was so fascinating about that place was you have this museum that so perfectly, in the right amount of information, can tell outsiders about what really took place during the 100 Days of Genocide. But the other part of the facility was an active memorial. And I don't know if I have this right, Jean, but the number 200,000 as far as souls that were in the mass graves there. And so it's such a different feeling to, and you feel this a little bit with the 9/11 memorial in New York City, but to go to a place to learn and then also see people who almost 30 years later are still actively using the space as a way to connect to loved ones. And so for me, that was, I think, really put the exclamation point on the amazement that I felt in, again, still seeing folks who have been through so much trauma, who are so perfectly able to articulate the trauma, which is just a whole nother topic you're going to talk about. But
Yeah.
again, finding joy in every moment that you were in, that still just blows me away. And I really want to integrate how to do that in my own life.
Yeah, and the memorial, they're now up to 250,000 who are buried there. And as they keep unearthing these mass graves around the country, they have then been transforming or transporting the remains of those they have found and bringing them more to a place of honor, because many of them were just buried in fields and soccer fields and stuff like that. And so getting a chance so that families more and more could connect with that.
Mhm.
Um, Another thing that like really like surprised me as we were doing this, as someone who teaches really sophisticated tapping tools, was to see how powerful TTT is. And TTT does not use any words. And Ufungunila have very consciously chosen to create a tapping protocol that doesn't have any words, because oftentimes, as you saw, they're not working with well-formed practitioners. Are working with folks who know a particular version of the tool. And because that they are consistently working with a community that is super, super traumatized, oftentimes when we are retelling our stories of our past traumas, we're giving ourselves the opportunity to re-traumatize ourselves, which is making it a bad experience now. It's making
Mhm.
the memory worse, all of those things. And it was really impressive to see how powerful and useful just the art of tapping is, just the act of tapping is, done in a context, in a way that is useful to navigate what is going on. And so just as a re-reminder and a way to reconnect with tapping
Mhm.
in a way that was just wordless, was something that was super, super powerful as we navigated all of that. What else surprised you?
I think, yeah, I think that that really stuck with me, and is still, as especially now that I'm working for you and I'm working in the tapping community. I started working in the tapping community back in 2015 with an amazing practitioner named Pamela Bruner. It's the first time Jean and I got a chance to work together because he's her business coach and one of her coaches. Is working with folks in the US, especially, or all over the world, but working within this tapping space. Um, we do have a tendency to get really stuck on doing it all right. I want to say the right things. I want to tap in the right order. And through the testimony from each individual who stood up and spoke to us, like Jean mentioned, we did have an opportunity to hear a little bit about the amazing amount of atrocity that they have been through and pain that they have been through. And Pastor John, who was in the photos of one of the last facilities that we were in, the refugee camp in northern Uganda, he even told us a story of the first night he learned to tap. And we did have a chance to learn a little bit about his story and what he has been through since he was a very young child. When he came home that night, his wife said to him, "You look different. Like, what has happened to you? You look like a different human." And so that reminder of even words do have an time, that's the most important thing all the time. And given the fact that PHN really focuses on and has them take an oath that they will share this, is I think sometimes we can get so caught up in saying the right things and tapping in the right order that we not only forget our power that tapping has, but I think we might also forget the power we have to be able to share this, because we don't have to give people in our life the perfect words. Just teaching them how to be in the moment, how to tap, and how to deregulate what we're experiencing really allowed me to even reframe when I'm talking to people about the work I do and when I'm talking about tapping, that that's just the process. That is not the power of the tool. Um, and even though I knew that about the work that they did, again, it's just so different when you get to see it. And like Pastor John said, he was instantly visually moving through the world differently. His energy, that even his partner said, "What's going on? You look so
Right.
different." So hearing that from him, especially since that was towards the end of our trip, I think really cemented in my mind even how I talk about tapping with people in my life, or when I talk about tapping with the people that we work with, just to help empower people. And at times, because I know the words have a very powerful place, to de emphasize that the words are the power. And again, Ulf and Gunelia, they talk about this. This is first aid. This is the
Right.
place of it where, in a moment where people are experiencing a very strong trigger of their past, we don't have to focus on giving folks the perfect word, but just helping them feel the power of the physical act of tapping.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, it was, yeah, fun to see that. When as we were doing that, it was like it was really fun to see John's boys, how invested they were, and because they basically emceed the entire event we did that day, and they just were cracking each other up and making jokes, and just like, yeah, it was just so fun to watch them caring for a group of adults. Almost everybody in the room was older than them, and they just were like, yeah, we're here to be helpful in that particular way. So again, it wasn't just one person, and it wasn't just one
Mhm.
person in the family recognizing him. That cascading effect that came out of that. The other thing, and then just kind of tapping into the folks there, and we saw it over and over again, was like, I was surprised, because this is something I've been doing for 16 years, how proud they were that they had learned this particular thing, like that they had put in the work and they were better at it and they could make a difference. And like when we were working with the healthcare workers, like they were like getting their friends together and taking pictures with their certificates together and dragging us in to be in their pictures. And it was so like obviously I love tapping. It's one of the most important things in my life, but to see, like, not just have something useful, but like to see their own pride and how far they had come to be able to do something that's like, at this point in my life, it's really easy to go, oh, it's this tapping thing. It's not that big of a deal. We learn it, we move on, because like it's, the easiest thing for us to underestimate is our own expertise, because it's just second nature to us. And that was so encouraging, not to know that we've just given them something, but they're like, no, I now know something, which was really fun to see kind of their joy in the pride in what they had accomplished, which it shouldn't be surprising, but it's fun to see people just proud of learning, which you don't always get a chance to see.
And I think that's a skill set not many folks recognize that Ulf and Gunelia have, that so much of this is empowering community. I know as a white American, I had a lot of feelings about showing up um, in a space that isn't mine, um, in an event and in work that I don't directly work with. There was a lot of concern for me of I don't want to be this white foreigner showing up like, here we are going to save you. And and this probably is leading into the impressed section of our
Yeah.
conversation, but I was so impressed with Placide, Ulf, and Gunilia's ability to have created a space and an empowerment where, like Jean just said, they wanted to show us. So they wanted to talk about all the people they had taught us to. And again, the joy and the warmth that the Rwandan and Ugandan people have in the South. We were able to meet at the refugee camp. I never at anyone within me felt like I was showing up to a space in. The opposite happened. I feel like people made space, welcome to feel connected. And this wasn't just the folks that we were tapping with, but to sit down with what we would call the warden of a prison. And he calls himself the director, who was just this magical creature of stoicness and warmth. And we were able to meet with, Jean mentioned the Good News Network and other individuals who were doing the work on the ground. Even they helped us feel like we are just part of a movement that is bringing peace, that is bringing joy, that is bringing empowerment. Because even as I was posting about the trip, there were still lots of concerns of I wanted to share my experience with this reverence that I often worried as an outsider I didn't have the right to do. And it was so amazing being in a space where that was my concern. That was nobody else's concern. And so I put that 100% at Ulf and Guinilia and Placide's feet for creating the environment and building relationships and empowering community in a way where they're viewed as guide. That beautiful photo that Jean posted where Guinilia has her head back laughing, that woman and another woman later called her Mama Guinilia. And so just seeing the space that they provided, Jean and I, initially we were like, we want to raise $100,000 for this organization. Now we're like, we want to raise a friggin' $100,000 for this organization just because the pure respect and joy and openness that this organization creates, even if they set out to do all the things they've done, I don't know if any other individuals can show up that way because Guinilia, she actually spent about 15 years as a journalist in the Congo. So we had the ability to travel with individuals who have been all over the world. They were tapping into up to 8 different languages. So I learned so much watching these outsiders who are building empowerment on how they then engage in the community.
Yeah, and that's the really key piece of it is like the thing I was most impressed with is how they're doing exactly what you're saying. They're empowering local individuals and not being super proprietary over their stuff. Like
Mhm.
one of the pictures that I showed you where Gunulia was leading a group of folks. So she led through an exercise, and then one of the local women led the exercise and changed the exercise and changed the order of it, did some things differently. And Gunilla turned to me and goes, "Oh, I guess this is the way we do it here." Like it wasn't like, oh, they're doing it wrong. Oh, we need to change something. It's like, oh, changing this small thing and changing this rhythm actually helps them to engage with it better. Awesome. That's now the way that we do it here. I need to pay attention to that.
And
And
10 days later, when we were in the refugee camp in northern Uganda and she was running through that exercise, she changed it. She did
that's right.
exactly what the healthcare workers did because she recognized, oh, yeah, no, yeah,
Yeah.
that's actually a better way to do it.
That's a quicker, faster way of doing the thing, and it's simpler and engaging with that sort of stuff. And like it is so rare to engage with people who have vision and care so deeply, but also don't have a huge amount of ego invested in the way that it is done. and
Yes.
being in a circumstance. Because like when we were in the prison, like it was, I don't know if Ulf and Gunilla had been in that particular prison before, but when Placide walked in, Placide was one of our local folks, who is one of our favorite people in the world. Like they just lit up, like they were introducing all of us and like, oh, foreigners, oh, this is great. And it got to Placide and it was Elvis had walked in the building, like
Yeah.
because he was the one that came in twice a month and worked with them and was firsthand in all of that sort of stuff. And so like it's so impressive to see folks who care so deeply but do it in a specific way in which they are truly coming in from a place of service, trying to understand. And it's really hard work to find good local community organizers who you can trust, who are helpful, who have like all of the skills to be able to do that and integrate with them. And so that was just, it was so immensely impressive to see their willingness to engage in that particular way as we kind of stepped into all of that.
And when we were at the prison, one of the folks that we got to meet who is doing work on the ground, who is from the area, Khalix, a gentleman who was with us, he actually had been imprisoned himself. And I believe, I know he was at a different facility, but he actually spent time in that space. And so to
wrongfully
also,
imprisoned, not just imprisoned,
yes,
wrongfully imprisoned
for almost 5 years. And to see,
yeah.
and he was really open. You know, we walked into the space and as a feeler, you know, we're walking into the space and I, you know, looked over and checked in with him. And of course, once I checked in with him, I'm just like, oh gosh, is this even my place to see how he's doing? And his ability to articulate his excitement, his pride of being able to come back to the space and, you know, pointing things out and, you know, educating us on the space. You know, I think we see here in the States and in other places where people who've had part of an experience then go into that work. But to see an individual who, again, wrongly imprisoned, but being able to move through the space and continue to give back, again, I was so impressed with somebody who's able to know how their experience is going to connect with others, but then also know when to move past it, in the sense of I am here for them. And so all of those pieces pulled together. I think the prison was one of the more altering experiences for myself, especially given what a warm environment, if you can say that about a prison, in comparison, especially to what we see here in the States. There was a level of compassion, a level of humanity. Again, the warden or the director sat with us on that stage for almost 2.5 hours because of his investment in the program, and to see men and women being able to be in space together. This facility also had a nursery because mamas are able to stay with their babies until they are 3. At the age of 3, they do need to go stay with family. But when we were in that space, there were 4 little ones running around, tapping. Again, like Jean said, there was no need to silence or shush. And the kids were moving through lots of individuals' arms. And so, again, knowing and seeing the importance of healing from trauma includes things like having access to your kiddos and knowing your kiddos. There was a separate building where they could go to nursery school, but they got to sleep with the mamas at night. And so for me, the prison experience, I think, is going to sit with me in terms of how the human experience has the capacity to be compassionate and find joy in some of the most painful experiences.
As we were there at one point, as we were doing one of the songs and we were tapping along to one of the songs, seeing one of the 3-year-olds correcting one of the 2-year-olds and tapping points and helping them like find the under the arm tapping point was like actually demonstrating the other one, and they were coaching each other, which was just awesome. And you're right. And it's one of those circumstances, it's this trickle down thing. Like the director of the facility was about my size, 6'1", 6'2", in a military garb, very imposing man. And we sat down with him in his office at the beginning, doing the introductions and all of this sort of stuff as one of our local
Three languages.
Right. And he's behind this giant desk and he's got epaulets and all of these things. And I'm like, oh boy, this is an intimidating man or whatever. And then he cracked a joke about the fact that because he was speaking some French to one of the locals and they were speaking some of the local and there was some English and whatever. And at a certain point he goes, I guess we're going to be speaking lots of languages today. And then just burst into this giant smile. And it's like, okay, like this is a human. Like he's doing a job in a very difficult circumstance, doing what they need to be doing. But also like it was clear that like he had the respect of what we would call correctional officers. I don't know what their title was because they always had to salute them when he approached him. But there was also a sense of like it was hierarchical, but it wasn't authoritative. And like just the way that he even communicated with his staff is one of those things that trickles down in such a way that was really, really impressive. To just kind of see that sort of stuff was just amazing firsthand.
And you could see where there were a couple of opportunities where he was touching base with the leaders who were part of the group getting the certificates. And so
leaders meaning inmates. When Lenny says leaders, she means the inmates. Yeah.
Yep. And so that was also something where you could see the mindfulness in understanding to have this be a place of safety, that again, that trickle down effect. And in my experience and what I experienced was when he would go over to talk to inmates or inmates would come up to them, there wasn't that fear. There was respect and reverence, but it seemed natural. You know, we were able to feel that this wasn't a show, that the way that the employees, officers in the facility were treating them like humans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the last little bit we're going to share some of the things we learned. If any of you all have questions of things that we haven't talked about or things that you're interested about, please feel free to whatever platform you're on, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch right now, feel free to just drop those questions into the chat box. We'll see them here and we'll answer those questions as well when we're done sharing that. So lessons learned. First lesson I learned, which is a lesson that I already knew, was how little I knew about East Africa. Like if you did like, and this is a typically American thing, that Americans have a tendency to talk about Africa as if it is a country. You know, like we say, I'm going to Italy, I'm going to Spain, I'm going to England, I'm going to Africa. And we just kind of turn it into this monolith. And it is anything but, you know, it's over 45 countries. Like, you know, some of the countries have hundreds of tribal languages, you know, I mean, and just watching folks kind of pass in and out of all of that sort of stuff. The Rwandan genocide happened when I was a sophomore in college. And so I knew it was a thing that had happened in the world, but it was like, if you had asked me 6 months ago to name the countries of East Africa, like I might have said Ethiopia, and that's about as far as I would have gotten in that sort of thing. And so it was a reminder as someone who doesn't engage with that regularly, how little I know. And so it was a good learning experience, just like understanding cultures and country and all of that sort of stuff. And a reminder that sometimes I am the ugly American that needs to do a better job of being aware of what is happening on this planet beyond, you know, that sort of stuff, you know, like, you know, in a lot of ways, like, just because of my worldview, like, you know, if you ask me about a specific African country, the first thing that is going to come, one of two things are going to come to my mind. Number one is the flag, just because I love flags. The other is I'm going to think of the international soccer players who are playing in Europe from those particular countries, because that's my engagement with it. And I'm getting a chance to just engage with the culture and the area and all of that, and remind myself of how much I need to be learning. What were some of the things that you learned?
I touched on this a little bit, but truly the extent of the work Peaceful Heart Network does. As I mentioned earlier, having worked with youth in the foster care system, I started talking to Ganelia about, you know, how can we get this into the hand of social workers in the United States to be able to teach this to kids in foster care? And Cornelia's like, oh yeah, we're working, you should contact this person in Costa Rica because right now we're working with people who work within the foster care system within Costa Rica. And you can read about an organization and hear, oh wow, they work in 30 different countries. But not only to see the level of skill that they have in the work that they do, but also they have this understanding and faith in TTT that, again, going from East Africa to then Costa Rica, like Jean mentioned, when you are the American who doesn't know a ton about the world, I, on the flights home, was just so blown away by, wow, we just experienced 2 countries and they do this in 30. And that reinforced their skill and their ability to know how to show up in community and build empowering communities is just next level. And I really want to take away sometimes my fear of stepping into situations because, again, in our culture, we have to be the expert to talk about something. I really want to take from them their ability and their confidence in the care that they have for the human experience and the benefits of tapping to be able to show up. Because at some point, it was their first time showing up in these different communities. So I really want to shift my own understanding of tapping, especially as I'm talking about it in the world, as it can be used as this amazing tool that we use ongoing. But then it's also the most powerful thing in the world. The next time I'm with somebody who is experiencing an emotional challenge or is having a panic attack, I now get to lean into this amazing experience of this is just how you're present with somebody. And it doesn't have to be more complicated than sometimes our Western brains are around this idea of I have to be an expert.
Yeah. And the other thing I think that's important inside of that is also recognizing the fact that, like, in order to make differences, we all don't have to go do the exact same thing.
Yes.
One of the things that, getting ready to go to the trip, I was talking to a number of practitioner friends of mine who are in a circumstance where just like, I couldn't do what you're doing. Like, that feels too scary. And that's not a failure. The beautiful thing about the way that, the Peaceful Heart Network is doing what they're doing is they're doing a very good job of connecting people at the level that they can make a difference in what they are doing. I could not go to northern Rwanda and run a training for a bunch of medical folks. But because it happened, because we did what we did, we provided resources for the people on the ground to do that sort of stuff. And so, like, I learned that, like, we don't have to be the ones going to the front line to make a difference in what is going on. What is important is for us to be recognizing what we can do where we are, be it in the local community or other places. And it doesn't necessarily mean we have to be the one that is going there, because we all have really different gifts. Like, Placide, who we've mentioned multiple times, this local, he grew up in Congo. His mother died. He was a refugee in Rwanda. Like, his story is just breathtaking. And everywhere he went, he made friends with everybody. I mean, to the point that, like, we were at the memorial and waiting outside the gift shop while we were waiting for something else. He met 6 locals and they were trading phone numbers and just like connecting in that particular way. And recognizing that that wasn't my job and that wasn't what I was capable of in that particular setting, but the person who was capable of that was doing that exact thing. And so it's encouraging. Sometimes it can be discouraging. Oh, I'm not doing enough. Oh, I'm not there. I recognize their lesson is I recognize I'm not doing enough. Like, I can be doing more. I'm capable of doing more with my reach, with where I am, but it doesn't necessarily mean I need to be going to all of these places to do that thing. But it's about connecting with and being present to that in such a simple way. And so, getting a chance to engage in that particular way is something that's really, really useful. And just reminding myself that, like, I can make a difference in a way. What are the things that we'll be talking about over the course of the next year as we continue to support their work, is recognizing the fact that, $25 donation meant that 2 inmates had 2 copies of the book so they could use it and they could teach it to someone else. And, I could not get a book into that person's hand, but I do have $25 because I would
Yeah.
very, very easily spend that in an out evening, and finding a way to connect those two things together is something that's super, super useful. And so it was encouraging to recognize that in community, it is an opportunity for us to respond to what is going on. As family, it is possible for us to respond to what's going on. And we don't have to be doing it as people doing it all by ourselves, navigating in that particular way.
Yeah, Jean and I had an opportunity to sit down with Ulf and Gunelia before we left. And I think this is, again, one of the many things that just solidified these individuals in my heart forever was Jean and I found out we were the first outsiders that have had the opportunity to go with them. Which, wow, when Jean and I both heard that, it's like, oh my goodness. They've had friends meet up with them on some of their trips so that they could take holiday with them. And this is tied into what I learned, but also I'm incredibly impressed by. They wanted to hear our thoughts. As Jean had mentioned earlier, they were very interested, and they are very interested, like Gunelia adjusting one of the exercises she taught. They want to keep evolving. And so when we were having this conversation, this kind of wrap up and, processing what we've experienced and starting to talk a little bit about the fundraiser in July, I was so impressed with the fact that, yes, we want to raise money for them. Yes, they are excited. They haven't had many large donors. I think we were actually one of the organizations that have done the largest donation that was private and not part of grants or, funding of some sort. And one of the things that they mentioned was, we absolutely want to and need to raise money, but they're also really excited. And you're going to see this in our marketing as we build up to this event. They're also really excited about the idea of people sponsoring learning tapping. And that was new to me, especially as we're talking about this fundraising piece of, they would love all the donations, but they're also really excited about the fact that this fundraiser that we have coming up is also an opportunity to sponsor, to purchase the gift of tapping. So I also just really want to encourage people as we're building up to this event to also think about, are there teachers, social workers, people in your life where not only could this be a really powerful gift for them, sometimes the gift of improving ourselves is not something we think to ask help for financially. And so I was so impressed by their mission is getting TTT in as many people's hands as possible, period. And so the idea of purchase this training for somebody is them living their mission. They are living the work that they do. They didn't come to us asking us to raise money. This was Jean's step. And now with this relationship and them understanding who we are and how we're operating in this world and who Jean is as a connector, that's just a seed I want to plant for people, is to think about, yes, please donate, but also think about how you and just the world you sit in and the people that are in your life and the empowerment you have, who can you give this gift to? And where in your world are you seeing where this tool might be helpful? And we will help you with that process as we get closer to this event. We're going to be talking about this a lot more during the event, but just a little seed to plant, because that certainly wasn't something I was thinking about when I stepped into this trip. Again, Jean and I, we are friggin' pumped to raise this money. However, we also want to continue to shout from the rooftops that TTT is something we all should know. And as a gift, they take an oath that it's basically criminal to hold on to this skill set. And that, I think, is one of the takeaways that's just really shifted in my mind as we're moving towards this event in July.
Awesome. So we're getting ready to wrap up here very quickly. Again, if you got any questions, feel free to drop them in there. Appreciate a few comments about the insights that have come from this particular thing. Again, if you would like more information about the Peaceful Heart Network, if you go to peacefulheart.se, they're based in Sweden. That's why it is SE. peacefulheart.se. You can learn about their amazing work. You can download resources for TTT. You can financially support them. If you go to 24hoursoftapping.com, if you've not done so already, you can get onto our mailing list. Currently, we have the list of, you'll see a lot of details from last year's speakers and stuff like that as we're updating the website, but you can get on the mailing list as you move forward, as we navigate through all of the stuff. And finally, if you know someone in the transformation or tapping world who you think we should be talking to, what we want to do is we want to introduce folks to a lot of new speakers inside of this as well, and new points of view. We're in the process of reaching out to speakers right now. If you just want to drop a note to support@tappingqna.com, if there's someone in the world who you think has something to say, we're hoping to feature somewhere between 30 and 38 speakers this year, interviewing folks from all over the world. And again, like last time, we'll make all of those videos available after the fact. Awesome. Doesn't look like any questions are coming in, which is okay. We appreciate you if you hung out with us today live. If you're watching this after the fact, if you supported the Peaceful Heart Network in the past, if you're thinking about doing it now, thanks for spending a little bit of your Saturday with us wherever you are in the world. If you have questions about anything that we have talked about, if we have questions about how you can get involved, if you have questions about anything else, all you need to do is drop a note to support@tappingqna.com. Anything else you want to add, Elaine, before we take off?
No, just those of you who donated last year, just know everything we talked about today, you did that.
Yeah, it was just really, really awesome to see that sort of stuff firsthand. Again, as Lainey mentioned earlier, she said we're going to frickin' raise $100,000. When I uttered that phrase, I did not use the word frickin'. There is a sense of energy behind this that, being able to share something so simple to create transformation in the world is an awesome, awesome thing. Hope you all have a fabulous, fabulous day, and we will talk to you all real soon. Bye-bye.